Hello, everybody. Welcome to Roundtable. Coming to you live from Beijing. I'm He Yang, joined by Huang Shen and Tony Reed. Good as always to have you join us. We have some fascinating topics for discussion today and every day. On today's program, do you remember how Jay Chou or Fei Wong or Mayday Wu Tian soundtracked our youthful days? I mean, teenage years? Or do you remember the thrill when you felt in your veins when you first saw Michael Jackson moonwalk in 1982 at the Apollo
Theater.
Theater.
Apollo Theater, yeah.
Yep.
I remember it.
You do?
That's for
and
sure.
I watched it on VCD in the late 1990s, and I couldn't keep my bottom down on the sofa. I was amazed by what I saw, and also, bear in mind, we grew up with these folks. We saw how they got married, got their divorces, have stuff done to their faces, and sometimes, I mean, Jay Chou, for example, that guy's just been having way too many cups of milk tea, and we went through all those years with those guys. So my point here is, recently, a music insider from the US said that it is the end of the vocal artist. I want to ask you, will we ever get a king of pop again? Will we ever get a diva like Fei Wong again? Does that all sound like something of the past? And you've got the introvert and extrovert on opposite ends of the personality spectrum. And like many other things in life, there are varying shades of gray in the middle. And that's where ambiverts lay. So, who's the better leader out of the three personality traits? You can find us on Apple Podcast at Roundtable China. Subscribe, rate, and review us. If you like us, tell a friend about us. It will help other folks to find the show. But first, on today's Roundtable. Recently, Lucas Keller, a music industry insider and also Milk and Honey CEO and founder, said in an interview, here I quote, "I think we're seeing the death of the artist. Songs are fully alive, but I think we're hitting a point in time where it's going to be more and more difficult to have follow-up hits for an artist. So, is it the end for the vocal artist? Guys, discuss."
That's a really big question, I think. And I think with... it's just so different today. When I was growing up, a lot of times it was records. You know, a lot of times you have this kind of display of music, and that was really special. And then it went to cassettes, right? And this is where you had these little tapes that would play for a while, and then they would pop, of course. But for a while, I mean, this was it. And then it went to CDs, and now we have this wonderful thing called the internet, where we can stream and we can listen to all kinds of music. And it comes with a lot of conveniences. Obviously, there's just everything is available. You can go to YouTube, and I was a huge fan of that for a while. I would go to YouTube and watch pretty much all the music videos of what was going on and seeing all of my favorite musicians. But now I think there's a little bit of a ceiling, because now it's just a bit different, because you have all of these, I guess, platforms where a lot of people are going and listening to different musicians. And there's just so many. I mean, there's just a lot of musicians that are coming out now. I mean, anyone really that has the notion or the gunk to just go and play something in front of a microphone and record it, and then they can put it onto, make an album and then put it onto a streaming platform. And so you just have it's almost like we're saturated with music. And so there's this feel where it's there's just so many options now. So I think the listeners are a little bit I don't know. I mean, it's hard to put your finger on it exactly.
Yeah, I do think China's music industry is in the middle of a dramatic decoupling from what we call the traditional distribution channels. And we are experiencing the new music. And my interpretation of Lucas Keller's quote is that now we are not in shortage of seasonal hits, but probably we fail to recognize who are the artists or singers behind these songs. And I once again I want to blame the short video platforms like Douyin or Kuaishou because they're changing the face of the music industry. I would say they leave artists super anonymous nowadays. Probably you're familiar with the tone and with the melody, but it's very hard for you to spot who is the singer behind the song. And like He mentioned in the intro part, that we were born like in the 1980s, 1990s, and we call our age the golden age of the Chinese pop music. And we are so familiar with these pop stars and their songs, but they are really good at producing what we call the stone cold classics. Because back then, they were in an era they have to battle for the chart positions. You want to rank in the top of the chart. But nowadays, if you check out the charts on probably Douyin or other social media platforms, wow, the charts should change every 3 or 5 days or even every season. And these songs are not everlasting. It may just be popular for a month and then a new song just came in and steal the limelight of the previous hits. And now we have seen for artists, if they want to break into the industry and they want to, shot to fame from their songs, it's pretty hard. Otherwise, you have to become an idol or you start your career as an idol. That's the reason why now we cannot use the album sales as the judgment criteria for the success of a song. Because when the fanfare and stardom get in the way, it's not the evaluation criteria to judge whether this is a good song or not.
Yeah, you guys touch on some really interesting topics, and there's certainly microcosms of what's going on in the music industry, and also how the music industry has been swept over by just the digital economy and technology in general. Like Huangshan mentioned, album sales, well, first of all, they're usually abysmally small, and
nowadays,
the labels probably refrain from even wanting to draw any attention on the album sales, and for the fact that these days, apparently, we only listen to singles, and we are interested in formulating our own playlist. Some people coin it as the playlist culture now, so you either come up with your own, or on all these music streaming platforms, you can get your friends' recommendation of playlists or whatnot. And so then if it's a playlist, then it comes in a whole variety of different artists' songs. And therefore, it's kind of rare to forge this loyalty to one particular artist. And also that drive in the old days when these talent were scouted by agencies and signed by labels, there was so much resource that goes to building up the image of this singer and gradually, hits after hit, and this persona is created, and we think that this is larger than life, king of pop, aka MJ, and king of rock was Elvis, I guess, and
depending on who you ask.
Oh, really? Who would be king of rock then?
Well, I mean, that's
that was
the
official
title. That's the official title.
Yeah.
And
for Chinese music lovers, those of us who grew up listening to a lot of Mandarin pop, Jay Chou, Zhou Cai, Elva, Xiao Yaxuan, and Mayday, these are just some of the really popular names that sort of they became famous really young. Yeah, like in their like late teens or early 20s.
20s, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh.
and then usually, their target audience would be like 5 years or so younger than them, or something like that. But there's no restrictions with age. But
Yeah.
a lot of people feel like they were part of your youthful years when you had the time to listen to music all the time, right? Like now when you have a job, like there's this study that said like after 25 or so or 30, people just stop discovering new music, and you stick with what you're used to and brings you memories because you like the feeling of nostalgia just wash all
Yeah.
over you.
Pretty much the days where you started dating, that's the music that you're going to pretty much
Okay.
listen to for the rest of your life. It's pretty
Oh, yeah?
interesting how that goes. But
for,
yeah,
for my life, I guess it's just, a lot less interesting, Tony. It was what I listened to when I was doing homework. So,
well, that too. But those early days when you
Yeah.
were, I guess, impressionable, these artists can really make their mark. And there's a saying that, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And I think you might have heard this in different contexts, but I think it applies to music too. And when you have a song that you've just kind of heard passing by, and you've heard it and you really like the melody, but you don't really have a lot of access to it, and you have to watch some program on TV. Like back in those days, it was like MTV. So you'd be like in front of the TV waiting for that song to play, and thousands of people would request to hear that particular song. And when you heard it, your heart just danced and sang, and you try to find a way to, to capture it, maybe because maybe at that time you didn't have the money to actually purchase the album or whatever. But it's just that delayed gratification of just listening and waiting for that song, and then when you get it or when you have the money, you buy the album. And so I think there's that element that's not non-existent today. Now we have so many options, and a lot. And let's face it, guys, most of us don't really need to pay for it. I mean, as long as you have some platform on your phone or whatever, you can kind of browse and listen to all these playlists like you mentioned earlier. And so you're getting a lot of music for nothing. And so some people just don't feel like they need to, contribute so much. And I think this is also inversely affecting the artists. So a lot
Yeah.
of them don't really want to. They're looking at their craft, and this is something that they pour a lot of their time and their passion into, and they're not really being compensated accurately for it. And I mean, there's just horror stories about some of these platforms where, like Spotify and some of these really big names, you would have to play to get the minimum wage. I guess there was a study like to get the minimum wage in the U.S., the monthly salary, which is I think around $1,200. You would have to play, your song would have to play, like depending on the platform, it varies, but it's like, it could be like 1 million times or 4 million times just to get that minimum wage. And it's just like, it's a lot. And if you're an up and coming artist, there's no way you're going to get that. You know what I mean? So I think that it's, for new artists, it's a lot easier these days to kind of get on the scene and call yourself a musician, which is cool. So I don't think that the vocalist will disappear altogether, but I think staying in it, I mean, for it being a lucrative business, it may be really, really tough because the incentive is fluctuating. A lot of a lot of the power is going to these platforms that are kind of frugal when it comes to paying the artist. So I think that's a factor. Too much options on our side, and then on their side for the musicians, the incentive. I mean, most of the money. I mean, I was reading on the World Economic Forum. They released an article about in the music industry, 50% of the revenue comes from live shows, and we all know that that's not really happening these days. So it's just. It's a really interesting time for these guys.
And it's a really tough time for these guys, for
Yeah.
sure, right?
Yeah.
You need to have at least 1 year's of like pretty solid savings in your bank to sort of live a comfortable life if you were a musician or for a lot of the performing artists
Yeah.
for 2020. Tony, what you just mentioned, I think is one story that has been told by Silicon Valley that it's never been a better time to be an artist. If you have a laptop, you've got a recording studio,
Yep.
and if you've got an iPhone, you've got a movie camera, and you can do production. So basically, it's the entry threshold from this perspective has never been lower.
That's right.
Yeah.
A lot of overnight stars.
But not everybody is an artist. As artists, on the other hand, would jump up and shout. And also, like, you can put your stuff out there, but who's going to pay you for it? And that's the other part of it. And making art takes years of dedication if you can really, well, see, in this postmodern era, sometimes it's really hard to tell. I mean, if it's something that can last, if it's a body of work that can last, I would say it will still need a lot of this creative genius and hard work that goes into it. But if it's a one-hit wonder that sort of just gets its 50-second of fame on the internet, there are some of these accidental hits out there, and I see, that can happen. But
you got to show love to the one hit wonders. I know there's a lot of one hit wonders that I love, and that I can't recall any more of their songs, and I don't even, a lot of times I don't even know their names.
Artist, yeah.
But that song was pure magic, and I think that just kind of separates the real artists from those that may just be kind of in it to, be testing the waters and got a little bit of success, and that success was enough for them, and so they stepped away from the industry. But like the real artists, the ones that were just born to do it, I mean, they're consistent and they keep coming back and they keep getting stronger and better, and you can hear their evolution in their music, and you're evolving with them, and it's just like a process where you guys are growing together, and you had this kind of relationship. And earlier you mentioned Michael Jackson, and it was the same. I mean, I just kind of felt, Michael was born into music. I mean, he was performing at a really young age, and he just, his music was pure. I mean, he was, that, I guess the, what's the word? The, he was music in a human form.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The embodiment of music.
Music, yes. And that man, if we may stay on, just for a couple more seconds on Michael Jackson, like, his music, when he was a little boy, he sang the song, I'll Be There.
Oh, man, yeah. That's a classic. Him and his brothers, I think.
Yep. And then after he turned a grown man, he sang the song again. And then I think it was some soda brand that managed to put a commercial together, but I just loved what they did about it. That was, you can hear his voice when he was a little boy, and then transform to when he was a grown man, and such beauty in the voice, and such a magical song, and I've got that on my ringtone, and when my parents call me, that's what will ring up on my end. So
what I think one more note.
Okay.
Sorry,
Michael Jackson, right?
Michael Jackson. Another note is just the appeal that he had on people, not just in the in the U.S. but just all over the world. I mean, you watch some of these crowds, people are falling over, they're crying and like getting carried out to the
ambulance on standby.
And I'm just like, I love Michael, but man, these people are insane when they hear his music. And I just, that appeal, I'm not sure if that's something that can be duplicated. And, I think just, the vocalists today, not taking anything from the vocalists today, there are a lot of amazing musicians that, whose music that I'm waiting for, and I hope they continue to do their music. But just that kind of music and that kind of appeal is just, it's tough to reach that point. I think that it really has to be past skill. It's almost spiritual. It has to be really deep. And it's tough.
It totally depends on the general picture or the big environment of the music industry. And now if we look at the Chinese music industry, many famous or big labels are trying to find a secret formula for producing a viral hit. But it also brings up another, contradiction between the music as just art for art's sake, or you just being a programmed means for entertaining the general public.
Yeah.
So when your general public are pretty happy with the low threshold platforms and the music brought by these platforms, how you can create a meaningful or a song with higher quality. And that's the problem faced by the industry as well. So if you're just going to the goal of impressing the mass public, then probably it's pretty easy. You just bring up a song with, simple, memorable lyrics, repetitive tunes.
Yeah, get a voice that people recognize.
Yeah, you just want to create a brainwashing effect. Then this piece of music can spread like
Fire.
a fire virus.
Unbelievable.
But
And I can't stand those songs. Those songs that you don't like, but they have a certain melody, and you just keep singing it, and you're like, no, stop! I don't like that song, and you just keep singing it, and it's just there, and it's just
That's what I call an earworm.
Or it's like
an earworm.
Yeah.
It's like a magic. It disturbs you, but it's just always in there. You cannot get rid of it.
No.
And the other dilemma faced in this industry is that some songs, they're popular, but the songs won't bring the same level of fame to the creator or to the artist of the song. And for some really popular artists, or what we call idols, their songs has a huge fan base, and they have a huge support from their fans. But I don't think their songs worth that value. You know what I mean? So sometimes for these fans, they feel like spending money on their idols is not only a way to show your support, it's a commitment to your idols. And they use this traffic and album sales records and to prove how popular their idols are. So earlier we have talked about the idols, they fake their traffic or their online presence numbers in order to secure their fame. But actually their songs are not that great. Only their fans love their songs, and it's hard to produce a song that can break into other circles if you're not a fan of this particular artist. So this is another awkward situation that some artists, they're famous, but they don't have a famous song.
Yeah, or they don't have a song that anybody who's not a fan would enjoy. And that's fascinating. I remember when Jay Chou first became popular. Oh, the older folks were so quick to judge, and basically back then I think it was only his fans who really loved him. I'm talking about 20 years ago or so. And everybody else was like, oh, this guy cannot enunciate. He's just mumbling. Like, that's not singing. That's no singing skills, like no technique involved. But 20 years later now, this guy has really stood the test of time.
Yeah. And
now, like, his albums and songs are deemed classic. But how many Jay Chou's are there out there? There's only him. And he came up with his own style of music and performance. So I could be wrong, but I doubt that many of these so-called idols would be able to sort of leave behind a body of work like Jay Chou has in 20 years' time.
Maybe that's not their goal, though. Maybe they're just in it I think people embrace music for different reasons. And it's an idol, right? This word idol implies that there's some worship involved. So whatever it is this person has, whether it's a pretty face or purple hair or whatever it is, they're worshiping that. And that's something that, they can connect with for, whatever reason. And so maybe it's not just the music. It's just they're being celebrated as an art form.
Okay. So is it fair to say, guys, that we will not get someone like Michael Jackson, Jay Chou, or like a Mariah Carey, like someone who can really sing? Because these days, this stuff can all be done by a computer in
now
the studio.
we have virtual artists and virtual singers.
Yeah, you got
like the
that too.
Luo Tianyi.
Yes, of course.
Who will never grow old, who will never have any scandal unless the company behind it wants to create some brouhaha. Yeah, and this is the age we live in. We gotta just look at this with a brand new perspective to try to understand what's going on.
We need a reset button.
We'll be back after this break with more discussion.
Informed opinion and heated debate. Find out what's got China talking and join us for your roundtable discussion.
You're listening to Roundtable with myself, He Yang, joined by Huang Shen and Tony Reed. Oh, the stuff we talk about during the break and right before the show. Half of it cannot be uttered to anybody outside of this studio. What happens in the studio stays here, okay? And
Oh boy.
and some of the stuff, it's just so much fun. You get to know these people you work with, and yeah, Tony, like when you get two hardcore MJ fans in the studio, we can't stop talking about it. We just quickly. Tony, what's your favorite MJ song? Like, of
My
the
favorite.
only one, ultimate. See, putting you on the.
There's so many.
You have to choose one.
I think for visual effects, okay. Obviously, I think I don't have to say it, but
Thriller.
was amazing. I mean, that scared me so much when I was a kid. I was just like, oh my goodness, it was incredible. So yeah, Thriller is definitely up there. And gosh, Butterflies is also a really beautiful song too.
Butterfly is a relatively new one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It
Wow, I'm
is.
impressed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's just I can't say a favorite because there's just so many.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the man's magical. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a lot of favorites too. So, well, we only have a 1 hour show. So,
Yeah.
okay, great. Now I know. Now it's like, I feel much better because, didn't get to ask you during the break. And it's great to have Tony and Huangshen in the studio with me coming up on today's show. You've got the introvert and extrovert as opposite ends of the personality spectrum, and in the middle, somewhere in the middle, lies the ambiverts. So, who's the better leader is what we like to talk about. And and of course, another topic is about corporate jargon, also known as corporate speak, corporate lingo, business speak, business lingo, management speak, workplace jargon, and it goes on, and my head hurts a little bit. And wait until I give you examples of what actually entails.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people use these terms and phrases all the time in the workplace, to the point they have become business cliches. So, does it add to your workplace credibility or not by employing these words and phrases?
It could for some people.
Oh, yeah? And it could diminish your credibility or it's not really trustworthy, how capable you are, well, yeah, we'll get into it. We have to talk about this to really understand it. And our podcast listeners can find us at Roundtable China on Apple Podcast. Another way to get in contact with us is to send us a voice memo or a voice question to ezfmroundtable@foxmail.com. And now on Roundtable, as we continue our discussion, whether it's synergistically leveraging strategic competitive advantages or disintermediating retail channels with bleeding edge technologies.
Did any of that make sense at all, right?
At all, right? Corporate jargon is a staple of the modern organization. But what's the first thing that comes to your mind after hearing those words? For some, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard. For others, there are times when using jargon makes some sense in the office setting. So yeah, Tony, you're the one that directed our attention to corporate jargons and its presence in the workplace. So what does the term jargon mean, if we can break it down a little bit?
Well, defining it is kind of funny, but it refers to terms or expressions or even acronyms that are specific to a particular industry or professional group. And as we know, each industry has its own jargon, and it's used in place of more easily understood, less professional alternatives. And like earlier you mentioned cutting edge, which actually became bleeding edge. And that was when think outside of the box became a cliche. So, I mean, it's just language that evolves in a certain context. And I think maybe you might have you may feel like it's close to slang, but actually it's a little bit different. Mm-hmm. They are related, but slang is pretty informal and used in more social settings. But they are related because both slang and jargon convey information not only about what the speaker is saying, but also about about the speaker themselves.
Ooh, what do you mean by the revealing who the speakers themselves?
Well, I think if someone is using certain words, for example, if I'm, say, you can park your vehicle at, what is it, Alpha Bravo Charlie Foxtrot 12, right? It's like, what does that mean? But that says that maybe I work for an air traffic controller or something like that, and I have to indicate exactly where this person needs to go. So
Right.
it says a little bit about my profession, right? So that's what it means where, you are indicating a little bit about what you do. But for people outside of that, it's a little bit, daunting. Like, I mean, why can't you just say ABF, 12? But I think, because I used to work in an airport and people used to talk like this. And for my first year, I didn't understand what anyone was saying, so it was really tough. But eventually, there were some people that would do that on purpose. And I think that's what this study on this subject goes into a little bit about how there are people who use it for specific reasons. And I think this is where it draws this feeling of annoyance from other people, because it's just like, there was a ton of easier ways to say that, right? But, you want to use these kinds of words. And this jargon can also can be a linguistic tool that people use to signal their membership, and again, as in a professional community. For example, in the military, some people may say ink stick instead of pen, right? So if someone says, "Hey, can you use the ink stick, please?" It's like, the ink stick. It would just make me feel like, oh man, I'm looking around like I don't think I have one of those, and it's like pen, and it's like, oh, okay, got it. But sometimes people do it to just be a little condescending, and I think that's kind of the point where a lot of people can feel like it's maybe this person has a little bit of insecurity and they want to kind of boost up or beef up their status a little bit by using these big words. And that's kind of what the study is revealing. It's kind of funny, actually.
Yeah, by saying these jargons, I just feel it shows one of your personality traits, which is you're super pretentious. You can just put things in a simpler way. And when I firstly heard your office jargon, I think of probably you're working in a very high-tech or professional industry.
Oh, so it works.
Yeah, and all your jargons are so exclusive and very professional. So for people outside of your industry, they probably have no clue of what you were talking about. And you are just working in this very particular industry. So you may get access to these vocabularies or jargons in your daily operations. And before people who are not as intellectual as you or just not into that field that much, it just looks like, words or just like with no meanings into them. But after you explain it, I think it's very funny. Who will talk in that way unless this is something you are super familiar with in your daily life, and then you just feel like by bringing it up, it's much easier than use a replaceable word, which is probably with a low register meaning. And in this way, you can better communicate with your colleagues because both of you or all of you have an idea what does it mean. But in general, I think you just make your speech more high register.
Yeah.
To make it like really formal, or
Yeah.
also, when when you say these words and you see if you get a response, does it stick? If it does, then immediately it's like, bingo, we have shared identity. We are a group.
I think it's double pronged though. I think that's one reason, and then the other is that if no one registers, then it makes you feel good about yourself.
Really?
For some people,
Being
according
the
to
lonely,
according to the research,
upset.
the research says that people often compensate for a lack of status by trying to signal that they have more than they actually do. And so in the study, there were lower status academics that are more likely to use doctor or PhD in their email signatures than those with a higher status. So that's something else. Experiments have also shown that people who feel insecure about their status are willing to spend more on visible, high status consumer products, but won't spend more on products nobody will see. So it's kind of like an, I guess you could say, an accessory that could be kind of shown around like a trophy or
Yeah.
like an earring that can kind of sparkle people.
Yeah.
If they're, if they like to be around people that speak in a way that where they don't understand. And it's strange because you do have people like that. If you speak in a certain way and they don't understand you, they revere like, wow, this person must be really smart. They're above my, my pay grade, obviously, and this and that. And so it appeals to these people, but obviously, I think for the general, public, it's a bit annoying. It's just like, okay, can you say that again in English, please?
Yeah, I suspect that this could be at least two things if we try to dissect it. It could be field-specific lexis. That's the linguistic term of, just professional vocabulary and terms used by a particular profession or in a field. So I suppose, let's say if it's folks who work in finances, they have all these abbreviations. I have no idea.
Oh, yeah.
And also, what's interesting is once they move that in English to Chinese, or when let's say if it's a financial firm here in China and does international business, or maybe the universal shared language in that profession is English. And then, so in a Chinese office, then they'd be conversing in Chinese, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to these specific terms or ways of expression, it's all English. And then if I'm a Chinese person who has nothing, who don't understand what's going on in that office, I would think such snobbish, pretentious people, and why would you be using that language when you can possibly find a Chinese equivalent? And that would just maybe sound better. But actually, in the eyes of those people, it's the shorthand. It's that's how they communicate with people who also work in that profession. And they don't necessarily, want to be ostentatious or look better than everybody else. Maybe that's not their intention. Sometimes maybe it is.
Yeah, maybe
but,
it is.
But yeah, so there's definitely, if you work in that profession, then maybe there's something about the language that you use at work that makes sense. That is simply how you do things. Well, maybe that could be one thing. But when you talk about corporate jargon, so then this is a little bit more widespread. It would be just a lot of these business jobs out there. It's not like what I was mentioning earlier, for example, lawyers, doctors, or maybe the financial people,
Bankers.
Yeah, that have so much of a, specific profession. But for, a lot of this workplace jargon, actually, some of them, they don't have anything to do with a specific technique or skill. It's just a way of expression. And I can give you a few examples. And I know, Tony, you came in prepared.
I got a few too.
Yeah. Okay, you go first then, because mine are kind of cute. They're not really the, whoa, just gonna raise your eyebrows kind of thing. Mine is just cute.
Well, if someone tells you to get something, a message or a document over the wall, what does that mean?
I only know Michael Jackson's off the wall.
Over the
Over
wall.
the wall, yeah.
Can I
Is
dig
it-
a tunnel?
Is it in a high place?
It apparently means to send something to a client.
Huh?
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't really...
So the wall means the wall
Maybe-
that differentiate you with your customers,
I
or
guess
that
so.
stop you from reaching out to your potential clients.
Pretty much. Or if you don't do too much work, they could tell you to stop boiling the ocean.
What?
Boiling the ocean. Have you heard this expression before?
I've only heard of boiled water, but how can you
Ocean?
boil an ocean?
I guess this means to waste time, and if you give for the image or the visual in your mind is obviously boiling an ocean would take a long time, right?
And also,
So-
it's impossible.
And impossible, exactly. So, so these are just some really weird ones. Like when I was working in the airline, they would ask me, "Hey, Tony, what's your 20? What's my 20? What's my 20? What does that mean?" And it took me about 6 months to find out that in this field, what's your 20 means what's your location. And this is kind of like a military term as well. So it's just all kinds of stuff. And, like synchronous diaphragmatic flutter.
What?
Yeah, are you having a synchronous diaphragm? See, I can't even say it. Diaphragmatic flutter.
Explain the jargon to me like I'm a 5-year-old.
I can't even
Please.
explain it. I know it just means hiccup. Do you have a hiccup?
Oh wow, that's a very fancy way.
Yeah, exactly. This is what they would say in the hospital. So, hospital lingo is one thing. And I found one for media, which I thought was a boilerplate. The boilerplate. Can you tell me what the boilerplate says? I mean, we should know this. We're like, this is journalism, right? So I'm like, okay.
What is that? Yeah.
I guess it's the brief paragraph just saying like who you are, like your name and your title on an article. And I was like, oh, wow. Learn something new every day. Didn't know that one.
Yeah. And
How about you, Huyang? What do you got?
I have the cute ones, I guess. And I have a slightly, sarcastic response to all of them. Okay, so I would say this is corporate lingo turned business cliche.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, ducks in a row. I just find it to be really cute.
Oh, ducks in a row. Yeah, I've heard that.
Like what does it mean, though?
I think it's supposed to mean, like when the mother duck, she's walking and all of her babies are following behind her. But in a business setting, it's like having things lined up so you can just attack one thing, I guess, sequentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my response was, do we really need to bring these cute animals into our business conversation? I'd rather not. And also, like when somebody says, my door is open, I'm like, your door is open, except when it's actually closed. And I know it's actually closed. There's just a lot of this stuff that...
Open door policy.
Well, yeah, especially, after the Me Too movement and all stuff. Yeah,
Oh,
please,
boy.
leave the door open. But also, like, to be honest, it's like, oh, yeah, so you've been lying to me all before.
Oh, yeah, you hear that all the time, to be honest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but, when we're doing the live show, sometimes I apologize ahead of time. Sometimes we need a little bit of like buffer time to think about what to say next, or or just to fill time a little bit sometimes. And then basically you just come up with these fillers or stuff to say just so that you can
To emphasize something.
Okay, that's a better way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Or we won't have the dead air.
Yeah. There's another called, I think we've heard a lot, is take it to the next level.
Oh yeah,
Right?
I like to use it sarcastically. Let's take it to the next level.
So in theory, this means to make something better,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in practice, it kind of means nothing. Mainly because nobody knows what the next level actually looks like, and thus whether or not they can even reach it.
Yeah.
Because like, what does that mean? What is actually the next level?
You need to be more creative.
Yeah.
Like have to dream it with your imagination, and
Work
then
harder.
you will be at the next level. That's how you are different. You're special from other people because your mind is already reached to the next level.
But what if it doesn't work out? Is it really the next level and just no one's on that level except for you? I mean, is it still a success?
As long as you're there.
Okay.
And also, like, with all due respect, whenever this sentence comes out, I'm just
Oh
like,
boy.
anytime a person starts with this sentence, this person is about to disrespect you.
Right.
That's how I see it. So,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. Okay, so would you call these like corporate lingos or more like turned business cliche?
Yeah, I think that these at one time, a lot of people may have not understood the meaning, but now since it's used so much, people get it.
Yeah.
But it has certain meanings. For example, like some of the ones like giving 110%. Right.
Why don't you just say 200 then?
We know this person has graduated from like elementary school and they have more than a 2-year education, but
Yeah.
obviously nothing you can't really give more than 100%. But we get what the person is trying to
Yeah.
say. But
Yeah.
I mean, these things just they're kind of annoying after a while because if you really read into it, a lot of them don't really have a lot of meaning.
Yeah.
But I think the ones that for today's discussion, just the ones that are really annoying, the ones that you just don't really know the meaning, and people use them to try to sound smarter than they actually are. And this can actually backfire where, if you're in a business environment and you're trying to appeal to a client and you're using this kind of jargon, it may just kind of put them off. They'll be like, oh, wow, I didn't understand anything that salesperson was trying to say. Was he talking over my head? Does he think I'm an idiot? Maybe that's why. And then it just distances you from that client, and it could actually cause problems.
Or it could be a click, and then the client's like, yes, that's exactly
Oh yeah.
the professional language that I was expecting. Well, I don't know.
I guess it could go that way too.
Yeah, well, okay, so this all happens in English, though. I'm curious if we have something like this in Chinese, which is a rich and very much tiered language and layered language in itself. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can think of also, just
For example.
well, it's kind of just cumbersome to quote them, but in Chinese, when you have these big meetings, and also, okay, so meetings is what big conferences, especially sometimes if it's the government setting, and also another example would be these hugely formal reports that
Yeah.
both of these examples, they have one type of language style that
And those titles are monstrous.
oh yes it's never ending. It's auxiliary
Yeah.
on top of auxiliary, and so many subordinate clauses, and you kind of had to just really dig through it and see what's the objective here.
Yeah. Some of the titles.
No, it's the subject. What's the subject here? Yes. What's
Yeah,
the,
and the title, sometimes you can get lost in all the adjectives. And it's just
Yes.
okay, you have to go back again and let me read this again.
Yeah.
Yeah, just jargons, man. It's incredible, especially
Yeah.
for some of these reports you're talking about.
Yeah, and they're just its own set of language. It's not
It's like it's English, but I
And
don't
they
understand.
have their own writing style. And
Yeah.
after reading one paragraph, which includes probably 5 to 6 lines, you can just use one keyword to narrow it down. To trying to summarize it.
Yeah, and that's why Tony sometimes. Maybe we've had this discussion maybe off the show before, why sometimes it's so difficult to understand some of the English paragraphs that's directly translated from these Chinese work reports and
yeah.
huge reports, because when you try to stay true to the Chinese writing style of these reports, and then it just doesn't make sense in English.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
It's very empty in meanings.
The register is completely different, and then
Right.
so
And imagine trying to polish something like that.
like
And-
that.
Yeah. Which is my task. It's like, Tony, could you polish this and make this a little bit more readable? And I'm like, sure. And then I try to reword it, and that's a job in itself. And then it's like, well, we want to keep the Chinese element here, and it's
Yeah.
like, so we're gonna need this word and this word and this word. And I'm like, but it doesn't make any sense if you do that. So
Yeah. So, I mean, it only shows how rich language can be, and it is, and also, just hopping from one language to the other. I mean, that's just fascinating.
It is.
And if you manage to do that, I call you a master. Coming up on today's show, introverts, extroverts, and ambiverts. Who's the better leader?
Looking for passion? How about fiery debate? Want to hear about current events in China from different perspectives? Then tune in to Roundtable, where East meets West and understanding is the goal.
It's the hour of Roundtable with myself, He Yang, Tony Reed, and Huang Shen in the studio. Are you an extrovert or an introvert? It's like asking someone if you're a cat person or a dog person. So which is it? Who has more of an edge and who's more successful at work or in leadership? Bubbly, outgoing leaders or reserved, restrained ones? The answer, as it turns out, is those who can be both, the chameleon-like ambivert. And Tony happened to be an ambivert, right?
I feel like I could be one. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that there's, I guess, a few types, right? There's the outgoing introvert introverts, and these people can be outgoing in certain situations around certain people. And then you have the antisocial extroverts, and these people who need time to kind of recharge before socializing, so they kind of hang out alone and then they go in front of people. And then you have the social introverts, and this is someone, an introvert that can dial into extroversion when they need it. So I guess there's different ways to go about doing this thing. I think as a leader, I would love to have someone that's kind of in the middle, because I feel like I have an introverted leader now. And it feels sometimes it's a little bit difficult to read this person, like, what is this person thinking? I know if I did that, I would, maybe I would think completely different. So it's hard to read someone if they don't fall into the same, I guess, type of person that you are. So, but then I think an extrovert would be a bit intense to work around too.
Yeah, is everyone just kind of in the middle? Because for me, I felt like I fit in the category of antisocial extroverts. I might look like an extrovert, but I do need some times to recharge myself. But for leaders, I can understand why they want them to be in the middle. Because when you communicate with your employees, people are looking forward to having a more approachable boss, which means they can understand what you have been going through. They can talk to you and trying to solve your concerns or whatever. But when they are in that leadership position, they have to be as rational and as calm as possible to solve all the problems and challenges that may occur in a way. So when a leader, he or she is just ambivert, it's just more comprehensive, and in order to run a huge company or a small group, whatever.
Yeah, wish we could all have ambiverted leaders sometimes, but extroverted ones, I think, are the ones. I guess there was a study, there's 40% extrovert, 40% introvert, and then the 20% ambivert. So it's a lot less. Not so many people are ambiverted, but in these days, I think that's changing because of, I guess, with this digitalization of work. Leaders are having to become more, they're going to have to listen more instead of talking, or be more, responsive instead of just being so quiet.
Yeah, I find it to be rather surprising if there were, 40% of the introverts actually managed to climb to the top of the corporate ladder?
Yeah.
Because usually if you don't sort of say you're amazing and wait for people to find out that you are, half of the time you just don't get noticed. And that's just really, that's the tragic part sometimes when I think about it, of corporate culture, or like waiting to be discovered instead of drumming up the noise and sort of sell yourself and advertise for yourself.
Maybe they have superb results.
Yeah, and
that's probably why.
Yeah.
They're managers, they're bosses.
yeah. That's it for today's roundtable. We'll see you next time.
From the African savannah to the ancient Silk Road, we invite you to join us on the front lines to share stories that move the world. Get registered on cgtn.com and submit a video within 3 minutes giving us a self-introduction to prove your presentation skills, language ability, and news sense as a reporter, presenter, podcaster, or social media influencer. All in all, what we'd call a media challenger. Not only will you be eligible to win up to $10,000, but you'll also get a chance to receive professional multimedia training and be enlisted into the CGTN talent pool. And who knows, there's also the possibility of having your voice heard and felt worldwide. The registration has already begun. CGTN, the Media Challengers. Come and join us and make a difference.